War. War never changes. Today I'd like to talk about something that really isn't Fallout 4's fault. It's a standard. The dialogue tree. I think the dialogue tree is awful.
I've got a weapon here for every situation. Hunting.
This is a dialogue tree. These days it takes the form of this 4-grid because that's easy for someone who's manhandling a PS4 controller to actually just hit a direction and choose. Previously, it would always be a vertical list, and you just choose, option 1, 2, 3, 4. But obviously, this is easier for console users.
Steering's free. Everything else is wholesale.
Let's see what you have.
A gun for every occasion.
Once you make a selection from the dialogue tree, it goes to the next branch of the tree, and sometimes you have nested dialogue options, but I didn't want to show any of those because those are all plot-centric. There is a robot that sells you guns. I think that's not a spoiler, so that's fine. I'm willing to show you that much plot tree, or that much dialogue tree. This is another form of interaction you can have with people. It's a list of a ton of different options, none of which are connected to each other. I mean, if I buy a 5.56 millimeter round, I can buy as many of those as they have in stock, but it has no bearing on whether I can buy the assault rifle or the braided girder, blah, 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 blah. So this is a set of unrelated options. However, the way I assemble them matters. I can buy a certain number depending on my resources. I can sell things to try and offset the costs. And I can quickly scan down to see if there's anything valuable, legendary or anything like that. A missile launcher that does extra damage to humans. Are there any humans that can take a missile launcher to the face? Okay, maybe it includes people in power armor. I can't afford it either way. But, I mean, I could buy something, if I wanted some oil, I could buy some oil and then be like, okay, I don't want to pay that much, so let's find some stuff over here that I can pay off, I can just sell stuff and we'll bring it back. And, we can try and figure out the best deal. So it's not that this is a bad way of interacting. The problem is that the unstructured way that it presents data allows the player to try and choose how they're going to proceed. And oftentimes, if you are trying to just have a conversation with someone, you don't need that much flexibility or that much complexity. So that's why we don't do this anymore. Anymore? Did we used to do this? Oh, sure. Back in ye old days, dialogue was mostly done by typing in keywords. A good example of this was Quest for Glory 1. You could also do this in one of the Shadowrun games. I can't remember whether it was the Sega one or the Super Nintendo one. But either way, you would select your options from a keyword. You just type in a keyword. And as you went through the game, you learned more keywords, and you quickly learned that you could type in those keywords on people you didn't think, you didn't learn it from them, and they would be able to tell you stuff. Quest for Glory 1 is a great... I didn't mean to go to the financial district, I meant to leave. Quest for Glory 1 is a great example because Quest for Glory 1 had a remake. In the original, you had to actually remember all of your keywords, and you'd have to type them in. In the remake, they just mined all of that data and put it in a long vertical list, so you would instantly know all of the keywords that you could say to any given person. Now, why was that worse? Well, because a lot of the times the keywords would reveal themselves after another keyword. So even though there was no intercorrelation, there was no network built into the keywords, the way that they would talk would reveal it. So, for example, you might ask about Johnny, and then they say, oh, well, yeah, Johnny is a flirt runner or whatever, and you say, well, what the heck's a flirt runner? So you'd have a new keyword, and then that character would understand that you had almost certainly already asked about Johnny, and therefore when they were describing the flirt runner, the text in there would have references to Johnny built in, and so on and so forth.
I can carry something if you need me to.
Because of that, I really like that approach. I like the idea that things can reveal themselves without actually being systematically linked in the game world. Another good example of that is if you asked someone else about Flurp, then they might say, oh, well, Flurp, that's a thingy that's run by people, and we call those people Flurp runners. Then if you were to go back to the first guy, even if you'd never asked about Johnny, you could still ask about Flurp running. That sort of complexity really lends itself to world building rather than plot building. So a dialogue tree is a network that branches out, and that's great if you plan to make the player run that network. You make the player do the things you want them to do so that your plot feels right. But I think that's a little bit unfortunate because, especially in these open world games, what we really need is a way to let the player explore and shape the world as they see fit and make their own alliances and plots and stuff like that. And by far the best way to do that, a super mutant hiding over there, by far the best way to do that is to allow the player to discover things on their own and then use those things wherever they see fit. And keywords are a great way to do that, whether or not you have to type them in or they get added to the list. Now, the big issue with keywords is that they're not console friendly. People who want to make a game for the console... I couldn't find it. People who want to make a game for the console and the PC are going to find themselves hampered by the console's basic flaws. And those would be the fact that you don't really have an easy way to choose from menus. This sort of setup is actually quite complex for a console, but that's the reason why when you're trading, you don't have a whole bunch of different options and stuff, because a console user couldn't use them very well. Similarly, the reason that the dialogue tree came into existence was because console users couldn't easily type all of those keywords. So I would really love to see some games which are PC only, or found a way to make it navigable on the consoles, that would use this technique and make their open worlds more interesting. By using this concept of a topic and a keyword, you can allow your characters and your players to do their own planning, do their own scouting and learning, and it would be a little bit more open and cerebral. These open world games are mostly just run around and shoot things. There's very little thought. It's kind of a shame. Oh yeah, here's Boston. There are occasionally little hints of Boston, like for example, here is a bookstore, or not a bookstore, it's here is the Old Corner Bookstore, which is an apothecary, or what used to be an apothecary, and there's a little historical data on it, but there's nothing in there. It's just here to make you think that maybe Boston, maybe this is supposed to be Boston after you've forgotten, because it doesn't look anything like Boston or have any Boston in it. Sorry about that. I just got distracted by the lack of Boston. Back to topic. I'd like to hear what you think about various ways of doing dialogue. I like the idea of a dialogue that doesn't have trees in it, but it doesn't appear that that is going to happen anytime soon. But what do you think? I'm going to quick travel somewhere. This is annoying. See you next time where I talk about VATS.